Everybody for coming in. I know that right now there are tons of communities throughout the United States and around the world who are really feeling the urgency at this moment. And I am so proud of Task Force Butler's team for coming up with this community resource guide. What our objective here is to provide the average person their first steps into combating hate in their own communities. If you've been following Task Force Butler for a year now, you've seen the kind of work that we do. We go, see where hate is on the ground, where neo-Nazis are organizing, right? That's not what we're here for tonight. We wrote the community resource guide for literal grandmas, for the grandmas who keep reaching out to Task Force Butler and talking about how the racists are spray painting symbols of hate, in their neighborhood, and that's making them, intimidated from going out and going to prayer, right? What we're here to do tonight is to help that person understand that they don't have to be afraid, that they can build community-based solutions, and that all of us are not alone in this. So today's agenda, we're going to be doing a brief intro into who Task Force Butler is, what we do, and how we help. Our community response guide is telling people how to tackle hate in your community. And then we're going to end it with a Q&A session. Some of you have already submitted things online, and my team at headquarters is organizing a document. We're going to get to all the questions that we possibly can tonight. Right in the middle of your screen, at the bottom, there should be a Q&A button. Feel free to, at any time, insert a question into there. And my team at headquarters is going to work it into our document, right? So if at any point I'm saying something that you're finding confusing or you'd like to know more about, please feel free to let us know. I want to emphasize that all of your participation tonight is anonymous. No one can see your names. No other participant can see who is on this conference call right now. We are recording that with this in mind. My voice and the voice of headquarters are the only voices that are going to be recorded. No names are being recorded at all. So when we present this online, this video will serve as an additional resource and introduction to our community response guide so that you can share this with your local religious, your faith communities, your schools, your anti-fascist networks, right? And again, this is our introduction to holding hate mongers accountable. So you can submit your questions to the Q&A box, or you can send an email to info@tf-b.org. That is, our email address that we use to interact with all of our supporters. So you don't have to come up with a question right now. If you think one a day later, please feel free to reach out to us. So regardless of who you are, where you are, you can interact with us during this presentation. So again, thanks to everyone who's submitted the dozens of questions that we've received over the last few days as we were organizing this event. So our mission is to counter the rising fascist tide in the United States by empowering veterans and those of you who share our passion to stand against hate. We're a coalition of veterans and civilians who are going on offense for democracy to protect religious, ethnic, and sexual minorities from fascist gangs in the United States. Now, when we put together a sentence like this, we're choosing our words carefully, right? Recognize that we are a veteran-led organization, but we are not exclusively veterans. We ally with civilians who understand what it is to serve their country, who have a desire to serve. You didn't have to sign to serve in uniform, to serve the purposes of a pluralistic democracy, right? So we are not here to exclude anyone. We want to be a force multiplier. And to kind of put things into context, when we saw January 6th, in the days after, some of the news reports kind of gave veterans a bad rap, and frankly, for good reason, at least in part. So many of those who were arrested immediately following the insurrection happened to be veterans, and that wasn't a coincidence. The reason why veterans were arrested shortly after, so many veterans were arrested so shortly after January 6th, is because so many veterans were at the center of the conspiracy to commit violence that day, and were at the pointing edge of the spear of the violence that day. So there's a reason for that. Veterans have an inherent capability for action. Now, most people, when they think of the context of extremism or of January 6th and the insurrection, they think of veterans and violence, and violence of action. But extremist organizations want to recruit veterans for the same reason that JP Morgan Chase does. It's because veterans are inherently team players. And here in the United States, we veterans hold a special place in society, in the collective minds of Americans. Thanks in large part to Vietnam veterans, my generation was welcomed home from 20 years at war in meaningful ways, not just thank yous, not just discounts at mattress places for Veterans Day, right? But real things like the GI Bill and an ever-improving VA healthcare system. And the things that led us to serve our country also make us valuable members of any team. Veterans are more likely not to become extremists, right? What they are more likely to do is own small businesses. They're more likely to be community leaders. That doesn't just mean running for office. That means being a scout troop leader or a soccer coach. And we are taking that attribute here and giving veterans opportunities to lead in their communities throughout the country. So I'm sure over the last few years, you've heard thousands of people, of organizations talking about going on, defending democracy. What makes us different is we're going on offense. Our goal at Task Force Butler Institute is to make it difficult and expensive to be an extremist, to be a hate monger. And the way that we do that is we collect intelligence, we collect evidence of criminal activity, and we report that to the public, to the authorities, to hold people accountable. The goal is for these extremists is to target minority organizations, minority communities, because they are perceived as more vulnerable. We together, veterans, American veterans, are the most diverse community on the planet. And we are here to stand and say no. We will stand up against hate. So our accountability partners are many. There are many anti-fascists out there who are not comfortable with working with law enforcement, and frankly, for good reason. But we as veterans, we have a bit of a privilege that we recognize, especially myself, a tattooed, bearded, white, straight veteran. When I talk to a cop's going to take me seriously, any city in this country, right? Not everybody has that privilege. So I wouldn't expect everyone on this call to be willing to work with law enforcement, and that's okay. I'm not going to tell you you have to, right? In fact, if you think that something needs to get to law enforcement, your personal values or your personal safety prevents you from feeling okay with that, we want to serve as facilitators, either in your community to connect you with other folks in your community who may be able to work, be in a better position to work with law enforcement, or will, if we can, help with that directly. We work not just with federal law enforcement, the FBI, the DOJ, for these hate groups that span across, the nation or throughout regions throughout the U.S. We also work with law enforcement. And education of law enforcement is a big, big piece, and we'll talk about that a little later in the presentation. We also work with community advocacy organizations, a lot of faith-based organizations throughout the United States. especially in the context of everything that's been going on here in the United States and globally in the last month. These faith-based community organizations are key. They are already established groups in communities around the country that others are often welcomed into. You can participate in fighting against hate. You don't necessarily have to be part of that religious community to organize with that religious community. So what is the Community Response Guide? It is a free resource for anyone to counter those spreading hate and fear in their communities. So we've written this, like I said before, for the grandmas who've been reaching out to Task Force Butler saying they want to punch Nazis in the face. Well, grandma, don't punch the Nazis in the face, please. We created the Community Resource Guide, the Community Response Guide, exactly for you. And it sounds like I'm joking, but I'm really not. We have a lot of folks in these faith communities who want to get active, and we are telling them how here. So if you haven't actually seen the Community Response Guide, please go to taskforcebutler.org/community. You can download a physical copy. You can print it out. The last 2 pages are a checklist that once you really read the guide, go through this presentation and get it, the last 2 pages are checklists that kind of just remind you for in the moment, you observe hate activity, these are the things that you do, just going through the list, how to hold folks accountable. So the guide is the core of the guide. It's all in the first word, community, right? It's building a community response to hate. No one should get into this feeling like they're alone, that they've got to fight, on their own, be in some sort of danger or anything. The goal of these hate organizations is to make you feel afraid, to make you feel like people aren't going to defend you if you put yourself out there. Well, it starts with building a community, and together we can demand accountability from local officials, from law enforcement, from participants in our economy, right? So what we're going to teach you to do is to use lawful means to hold hate mongers accountable. We're going to tell you how to amplify your voice and the voices of others who reject messages of hate, and how to demand law enforcement and local elected officials to work to counter these groups. Now, in many cases, we have found that law enforcement and local officials will say, oh, we need to pass a new law to stop these neo-Nazis. Well, one thing that you need to remember, whenever you're faced with that, local authorities who say, oh, we need to pass a new law to stop these neo-Nazis from doing X, Y, and Z, I want you to go and look at your local state is going to have a statute, a law about criminal gang activity. The criminal gangs that law were written for, often decades, if not centuries ago, those same descriptors, things like operating under a common name, wearing colors or a distinct uniform, wearing similar tattoos, all of these descriptors of criminal street gangs, most of these extremist organizations also fit those. So when law enforcement, when local officials start talking to you about, oh, we need new laws, just say, this is a criminal street gang. They're all wearing red and blue. Well, if they were all wearing red, we'd know what gang they're a part of. Or if they're wearing blue, we'd know what gang they're a part of, right? If they're wearing both red and blue, that's also the colors of a gang. So our number one priority here for you, for all of these communities throughout the United States, is safety. There's safety in numbers, there's safety in community. You do not need to put yourself at risk to document and counteract hate group activity. The first step is finding people in your community who share the same values, who share the same concerns with you, and building a plan of action. If you feel the guidance that we're offering to you today would cause you harm in any way, you simply just don't need to do it. We created a checklist for a reason here. You don't need to talk to law enforcement if you don't feel comfortable doing that. You don't need to talk to some larger nonprofit if you feel that nonprofit that combats hate doesn't uh, align with your values. That's okay, right? We created multiple options so that folks of all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of personal concerns, situations, tolerances for safety, so that everyone can take those first steps. So again, we're teaching you how to counter hate groups. Going through your guide, that again, you can go to taskforcebutler.org/community. You can look at it on your phone in the moment when you need it. You can print it out and carry it with you. It is always accessible. It starts with observing illegal hate group activity. Now, remember the word here that we inserted: illegal. Not everything that you see that is hateful is illegal. If a neo-Nazi or white supremacist goes outside into any random street and holds up a sign that displays a symbol of hate, that is not illegal, right? That type of thing is covered by the First Amendment. But when they cross the line into harassment, intimidation, property destruction, which so many of these neo-Nazi organizations use to spread propaganda, that's where they're stepping into criminality, and that's where we can find accountability. So in order to hold these folks accountable, again, it's all about building a community response, observing and documenting these crimes, and reporting your evidence, not just to law enforcement, but to your community, to other nonprofit organizations that are monitoring hate activity, and to other community practitioners. So, reminder: questions are welcome. To submit your questions, use the Q&A box. It should be right in the bottom middle of your screen, or you can send an email at any time to info@tf-b.org. So we mentioned the illegal activity before, right? Graffiti, flyers, other acts of property destruction. Right now, with the wars that are going on in the Middle East, we are seeing an intense amount of debate about things like flyers getting put up, flyers getting ripped down, spray paint that is targeting religious or cultural institutions. But this is not new. This type of thing is going on around in communities around the country every day of every year, right? We just saw that over the weekend, the front page of USA Today talked about Haya Reichik. She's the person behind Libs of TikTok. She's someone who tweets out, in out of context slur against the LGBTQ community, targeting a specific location or individual, and that person or that venue ends up getting inundated with bomb threats and property destruction, right? What Haya is doing is so far is considered within the First Amendment. But those who are acting on her stochastic terrorism, when she's choosing a target, those who are going and breaking windows or spray painting a venue or calling in bomb threats, that's the illegal activity. That's where we can find accountability. Again, we also want to make sure that we include acts of intimidation or violence. It is never okay to touch someone, as part of your getting ideas across, right? You can express extremist goals. That is a First Amendment protected activity. But if you put your hands on someone and you're committing violence, you've crossed the line. And again, that's where we come in. We make sure that we get accountability for that. So to build a community response, we want you to organize with others who oppose hate groups. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. There are great resources that exist already. Now, everything that I referenced tonight in terms of resources and other organizations, they are linked on our webpage. So if you go to taskforcebutler.org, /community, or if you've got the PDF downloaded, whether it's on your computer or phone, every resource that we list is linked in our guide, right? So don't worry about writing this stuff down. It is available for you. So if you go to a community resource guide provided by someone else, that is by another organization, the Western States Center, they created this really, really, really comprehensive instruction manual on how to build a community around fighting back against hate. We want to encourage you to also take a look at that. It's not as digestible as our 10-page report, right? We're doing an introduction. They're doing the college level course on it. So that link is again, it's on our website. So when you're building a community, whether it's on a college campus, in a church or a synagogue or a mosque, you're building your community around collective goals. You want to discuss, what are your expectations within the community for dealing with other groups, other community practitioners. If you're part of a community that doesn't feel comfortable talking with law enforcement, again, that is okay. And that should be expected. Unfortunately, for many communities in the United States, it's simply not safe to engage with law enforcement. And if it is safe, sometimes it's just not productive. But you may be able to find folks like us, Task Force Butler, or other veterans organizations who may be able to express your concerns on your behalf to law enforcement, to other accountability practitioners. Be aware of privilege. Like I said, that I've got multiple layers of privilege. I recognize that I can use it. That can help activate law enforcement and other people in positions of power. So when you're communicating with your community group, you want to make sure that you have a safe space for communication. We prefer you use an app like Signal or WhatsApp. These are encrypted apps. You can build groups where you're invite only. Make sure that anyone who's got access to that is someone who personally, someone who can be vouched for. You're not doing this out in the open online. Unfortunately, we live in a world where to fight against hate can sometimes make you a target. So going back to our first rule, is we're doing this in a safe environment. We're not doing it on Facebook. So to build a community response, you want to develop a plan within your group and make sure that everyone knows the plan. If someone wants to go talk to law enforcement or to journalists, everyone in the group needs to understand what the plan of action is and to kind of game out the possible responses. So a reminder again, you can send questions our way using the Q&A box at the bottom or info@tf-b.org. So when you're documenting crimes, if it is safe to do so, you want to create visual evidence of the activity. So take just a small handful of photographs to capture the who, the what, the when, the why, and the where, right? When you're taking these photographs, remember that you're capturing not just a moment of outrage, right? A lot of us have this impulse to catch something outrageous and immediately post it online on social media. Instead, think of yourself as documenting evidence. So you want to make sure that the clarity of the image is as high as you can possibly and safely get it. You want to make sure that you've captured the whole scene. If it won't fit in the whole frame, say there's a giant banner and you're very close to it, just take a bunch of photos. The reason why I'm harping on photos is because image clarity is often very important for the purposes of evidence. So there's an acronym that we use in the military sometimes. It's called SALUTE. That stands for size, activity, location, unit identification, time, and equipment. Again, you don't need to write this down. It's all available on our website, taskforcebutler.org/community. Really quickly, we just want to get into what we're talking about. When we're talking about size, you want to quantify what happened, the activity, what did someone do, location, where did it happen? Is that location relevant? Like, is the location symbolic? Are they targeting someone? Could it be a hate crime because of location? These are the things that you want to think about. Unit identification, we're talking about who were the perpetrators. Also, who were the intended victims, if that is clear from things like time and location. Time, obvious, date and time. When you're taking a photograph, that is often going to capture your date and time right there. So it's not something you need to write down. It's going to be right in your phone. And equipment. Did a hate group use stencils, or did they hang a big banner, or are they burning fires or flares? If they're doing something like burning fires or flares, have they done it on private property? Because that type of thing can turn a trespassing charge into a hate crime. So you're going to use all of the evidence that you've gathered. You're going to write a report of your observations, simple, clear, and just the facts. Again, look at this little breakout right here, the SALUTE acronym. You can write your brief report for your community in those boxes. It doesn't need to be a 20-page report. Just the facts, those are what matter. So you can do this now, or you can do this after the fact. You want to research all applicable local, state, and federal laws. Hate crimes are vary widely state to state. You can start with the federal laws, things like the Matthew Shepard Act, to have a general sense of what a hate crime looks like. But wherever you are in this country, your state has its own specific hate crime laws. Some simply do not protect some communities, like often the LGBTQ community in some of the most conservative states are left out. In some states, gender identity, women are not protected by hate crime laws. In other states, those aspects of identities, are protected by the word of the law. Important to remember, again, back to rule one, safety. Safety is our number one rule. Don't make yourself a target. You want to be purposeful about what you post on social media. And anything that you're posting out in public to show the documentation of a hate crime that's happened in your area, you want to sanitize it. These hate groups will often include their logo or their website or a QR code that will lead sympathetic people who may see your presentation of documentation of a hate crime, and they'll use it to find that group and get recruited. That is the whole purpose, one of the primary purposes of their propaganda, intimidation, and hate campaigns. So simply sanitize any evidence of hate activity when you're posting it in public. That said, maintain original copies of any photo or any video. Remember, you want to keep the evidence in the best condition that you can if you're handing it over to a community safety practitioner, whether that be law enforcement, an organization like Task Force Butler, or your own community group. When you're reporting evidence, you're again, like I just said, it's not just for law enforcement, it's for your own community group. It's so that everyone who you're working with understands what happened, when it happened, how it happened, and together you can find who is engaging in this, discovering patterns together, learning trademarks so you can begin to understand or even predict when this type of thing happens, so that you, cameras, law enforcement can be in position to anticipate it when it's going to happen. We're reaching the end right now. Again, another reminder: if you want to ask questions, we're here to answer them. If we're not able to answer them by the end of this seminar, we are going to be sending out emails. So please make sure that you're on our list. You can sign up on our website. If you're here, if you were invited, you're already on the list. So we will provide you all of the information that we possibly can. So thank you to everybody for coming tonight, and seriously, from the bottom of my heart, to take time out of your afternoon or your evening to get ready to combat hate. with Task Force Butler, with your local community. It means a lot to me. You know, we have all seen so much suffering, especially recently. And to see people start to step up this way is tremendously inspiring. So thank you so much. All right. And so I am going to get into our questions. So again, if you ask a question, I'm not going to say your name. So please feel free. My headquarters team is going to be populating a document. You know, we'll have as much of a back and forth as we can in the remaining half hour or so. So the top question that came in as we were preparing for the seminar is, you know, what can individuals do? That is what has brought us here together. Our emphasis is on the fact that individuals are not doing this alone. We want each of you to join together with your communities and make sure that you know you are sharing responsibilities, that you are not, you know, putting all of this responsibility on one person. You are identifying, you know, whether it's local law enforcement or local officials or other nonprofit organizations, you're identifying who can help you in this, because not any of us are alone. So also keep in mind that this presentation is going to be available to download. We're going to be distributing it on our website, on social media, and the like. So all of the resources that we are mentioning tonight will be made available in this video, in the footnotes. So just give me 1 second to read this next question. As a faith leader, we're organizing a major movement resistance at state capitals. Several of our members are concerned about security. What can we do to enhance and be more proactive for this event, our members, and ensure more safety overall at these rallies? So the person who's asking this question is involved with a pretty well-established advocacy organization. But I'm going to give this answer in a way that helps others who aren't activists kind of understand where we're starting from. So assuming a lot of knowledge from the questioner, let's start at this. So before you plan a protest, it is always, if you're doing this as part of a group, it is generally a good idea to have someone designated as a liaison to work with law enforcement. Most advocacy organizations that host rallies regularly, even if they're not overtly political, if they're in any way contentious, they already have trainings built in for law enforcement liaisons. You know, these are not people who are working with law enforcement in a law enforcement capacity. These are basically people who are letting law enforcement know, this is where you're going to be physically on the ground. If traffic needs to be adjusted to keep people safe, if barriers need to be put up to keep cars away from your people, those law enforcement contact liaisons from your organization, they're going to be the ones specialized in this kind of thing. Now, if you're not part of one of these organizations that does these type of actions all the time, and you're interested in getting involved in this type of action, go talk to the folks that you've seen out on the street in the last few years. You know, we've had racial justice protests all around this country. We've seen high school students organizing marches, right? There are tons of folks in communities around the country who have this experience. So if you feel like you don't know, you feel unsafe, reach out to these organizations, student groups, religious organizations, other advocacy organizations. They're going to have the answers for you. All right, so next question that's coming my way. How do we hold our elected officials and community leaders accountable to publicly denounce these hate groups and their views? Well, we talked today about gathering evidence, right? One of the only way to advocate for change is to define and measure the problem first. I learned this as a veteran advocate, as someone who worked on things like veterans healthcare and the GI Bill, right? In order to get Congress to move a bill through Congress and get signed into law, which always costs money, we had to show the problem is this big. This is how we measured it, and that's why you, as the person who represents us, who is in a position of power, must act because the community is demanding it, right? So what we talked about tonight was gathering evidence of criminal activity. You in your community, when you're gathering this evidence, you're compiling it with your community response group. You can get together and like we said, you can interface not just with law enforcement or government officials, you can talk to the press. You know, again, making sure that everyone in your group understands the way that you're talking to the press, you know, what your expectations are. You can do things like write opinion op-eds or letters to the editor for your local paper, whether that's, you know, on your local town paper or county, or, you know, it could be a student newspaper. These are the tools that I have learned as a veteran advocate for years, are incredibly useful. And you know, you could be forgiven, because I've forgiven myself, of never thinking, oh, I'll just write a letter to the editor. Those types of things kind of plant a stake in the ground. You know, show people who are elected representatives that there are people in the community who have identified a problem, who care about it, and who are taking the time to communicate that problem, and they're going to come to you for solutions. You know, we talked before about how hate crime laws are not the same in every state, but there are some states that that will be willing to listen to other states. Something that might surprise you: the state of Florida, their criminal street gang statute, their statute that goes after street gangs. You might not assume that Florida has a great hate crime law, but their hate crime law is built right into their criminal street gang law. In Florida, in the text of their law about criminal street gangs, it specifically names hate groups as criminal street gangs, right? There are other states throughout the country that can look at Florida and see that there is some value. There are organized hate groups that go around wearing the same color, operating under the same name. Again, like spray painting the same tag, right? They meet all of the requisite statutory descriptions that make up a criminal street gang. So you're not just talking about hate crime law that the average beat cop in the moment might not understand or interpret properly. But when you talk about criminal street gangs, the average beat cop gets it. They understand it. So if you want to, you know, put in the work to get your local laws a little tighter, a little more active for combating extremist organizations, that is one that you can take on. So we've got two related questions coming up. How is Task Force Butler communicating to the people that are not aware of ongoing fascism? And the next, what's the best way to get my family and friends involved to be aware of the real dangers and not to scare them into doing nothing? So Task Force Butler is about to start producing an educational series. The first one is starting with a question: what is fascism? And one of the things that we discuss in the opening of what is fascism is the power of words, and how a lot of folks use this term fascism in bad faith to dull our senses, right? But fascism is definable. It is something that has its roots in history, and history often rhymes, right? So keep an eye out on Task Force Butler's website, on social media. We are going to be publishing What is Fascism in the coming weeks. And this helping you kind of not just define what fascism, the idea or the movement is, or what it looks like, but how to communicate with your family, of saying, like, here is the historical parallel to the things that we're seeing in our country or overseas. And this is why we should be concerned. So I think that the best way to get your family and friends involved and to make sure that they don't feel helpless is to provide hope. And that's what the community resource guide is, and the community response guide is all about. It's about not fighting back, but going on offense for democracy. It's about making hate groups feel unsafe, making them recognize that they are going to face consequences for victimizing, intimidating, and harassing our communities and attempting to destroy our democracy. All right, next question. What are some strategies to develop community mutual aid without attracting the attention of fascists? This is a great question. So, well, look at me. I am a bald white guy with a beard. I am a veteran. I'm covered in tattoos. I am a gun owner. I regularly practice at the range. I blend in, and the way that I look, a lot of folks anywhere I go in the United States will say things to me that that they might not say to someone who doesn't look like me, who doesn't fill the same stereotypes that I do. So I think that recognizing that the American veterans community is the most diverse community in the country, recognizing that there are veterans in your community who feel just like you do, that is a good way to start organizing mutual aid in a way that does not attract the attention of fascist organizations, right? It's again, people who look like me can do things that might, that won't attract the attention of fascists that others don't, right? So find people in your community. Again, veterans, there are millions of veterans in this country. Many of them are of the same mind of you about being concerned about fascism, and work with folks who can leverage their privilege. So what can local groups, this is the next question, what can local groups do to identify masked members of hate groups when they're out in the street intimidating the community? So going back to something I said a few times before, weighing in value photographs over video. This phone that I carry in my pocket is an incredible still camera. If they're pretty user friendly. Your iPhone, your Android has probably got a better camera in it right now than you might be aware of. So get in there, just kind of get used to using your camera. Take when you're out on the street, just take some photos in some different situations. Take photos of while you're moving, while you're taking photos of something that is moving, so you learn what you can expect out of your equipment, right? The way that Task Force Butler got good at unmasking fascists and organizations like Patriot Front and NSC 131 is we recognize they're relatively small groups. The neo-Nazi organization Patriot Front might show up with 100 or 200 members, and march through Washington, D.C. while anti-fascists redecorate their car, or their convoys, their cars. Well, if you take a bunch of photos of these members of Patriot Front, you start to recognize that yes, they're all wearing khakis and they kind of look like they're wearing a Best Buy uniform, but They're not all wearing the same shoes, and though the pants are tan, they're not all khakis. Some are cargo pants. You'll start to notice that these folks, only show up at events in certain regions, or more frequently, the same pair of pants, the same boots, the same body shape, only shows up in, say, the state of New York, consistently throughout the year. Over time, these fascist organizations, they're going to wear pieces of their fascist uniform at some other point in their life, at some political event, and over time, your community can start to build in this collective memory of hey, I kind of recognize that guy. And if you take enough photos, you'll catch a freckle, you'll catch some facial hair, even if they're wearing a mask. Over time, if you collect enough data, you collect enough photographs, your community will hit that eureka moment. You might be lucky and get a license plate or a VIN number. If a bunch of fascists show up wearing masks and then get into their cars right in front of you, right? That could be your eureka moment. But again, going back to take still photos. Still photos are so valuable. Next question is, how does Task Force Butler fit in with other anti-hate groups, for example, Southern Poverty Law Center, Anti-Defamation League, and others? Thank you for this question. So something that I should have said in the beginning is Task Force Butler is not here to be the solution. We are one answer. We are one piece of a broader solution. We are a relatively small organization. We share our intelligence with reputable nonprofits throughout the country, including SPLC, the ADL, Human Rights First, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under Law. Our goal is not so that we take down hate groups. Our goal is to empower communities, nationwide and down at the micro level in cities and towns throughout the United States, make sure that communities can hold these folks accountable. So if it's not law enforcement, who's taking our reports, our intelligence packets and making an arrest on it, it might be an organization like the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights Under the Law that uses our report as the basis for a lawsuit against a neo-Nazi organization like Patriot Front, right? So where we fit in is we are force multipliers. We're a small, scrappy organization, a bunch of veterans and volunteers around the country who are working, day and night together to hold accountable hate mongers around the country. And we are here, to produce stuff like this, the community response guide that we're all here to talk about tonight, so that we can be your force multiplier. We can provide you this entry-level discussion document, instructions on how to hold hate accountable in your local community. So next question is, how does someone become directly involved, do research or assist beyond just financially? So we are a small organization. We don't have much staff at all. We're volunteer-led. We can only grow so fast. What we are here to do tonight is to provide instructions for you, for everyone watching this, to work with your communities to combat hate. Again, Task Force Butler is not the answer to hate groups. We are providing instructions on how you can be the answer where it's right for you and your community. We've said it a few times, but it's worth repeating. You're not alone. We're here to talk about a community response, how you can work with like-minded folks who live where you live, who are in your neighborhood, who know the microculture of your area. You are best placed to defend your way of life by going on offense, to keep these hate groups on their back foot and to hold them accountable in a court of law. in your local economy, and ultimately in their way of life. If we can take away their resources through legal means, they are not going to be able to spend their time, their money, or any other resource trying to do harm to you and to your community. So, thank you, everyone. To wrap this up, thank you so much for joining us tonight. I am so proud of my team. Thank you to headquarters for all of your work to make tonight a success. I want to thank the dozens of folks out there who forwarded on invitations and got your friends, your families, your colleagues involved. We have been able to see just from the RSVPs that are coming in that there are communities throughout the United States who came together to share this night with us. I am so thankful to all of you. So with that, please just remember that the community response guide is available anytime on our website, taskforcebutler.org/community. Please follow us on social media. Check back on our website for updates. We'll soon be publishing our "What is Fascism" intro to how you can talk about these issues with your friends and your family. And again, if this seemed a little pedestrian to you, if this seemed a little too entry level, if you consider yourself an activist, if you've got time protesting, going out in the streets, if you've got a tight group and you're ready for something more, go to our website and look at our Street Teams Guide for activists who are more experienced, looking to take a more proactive stance. We're there for you. We're here for you too, right? Go to our website, check out the Street Teams Guide, and make sure that everyone that in your community who's looking to get involved in combating hate knows about the guides that we are providing for free online. Remember that there's a PDF that you can print out, you can carry with you if you feel that's necessary, or just go to taskforcebutler.org/community. It will always be there, and we update it regularly. All of the resources that we've talked about tonight, there are links embedded in the PDF and on the website. So if you need to, if you want to become more familiar with symbols of hate, if you recognize that something's off, say someone spray painted a building is being targeted because of the community's identity, we have got the ADL and the SPLC's glossaries on hate, so that you can study up, you can better understand what you're seeing, so you can be more empowered to hold people accountable for criminal activity. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you guys coming around, and have a good night.